My sister accidentally sent me a video. My parents mocking me, calling me a clueless ATM and a foolish girl. Hurt, I cut off the $5,000 I'd been sending them every month. Days later, they stormed in furious. My mom slapped me, screaming, "Why did you stop the money?" I stayed quiet and laughed. They had no idea what a mistake they had made. I used to believe that helping your family, especially your parents, was the most natural, noble thing you could do. For years, I lived by that belief. My name is Alyssa Monroe. I'm 38 years old, a tech entrepreneur based in Austin, Texas, and for over 5 years, I sent my parents $5,000 every single month. No questions asked. No expectations. Just a daughter doing her part. They told me it was for medical bills, for the mortgage, for emergencies. My dad, Douglas, had retired from real estate years ago, and my mom, Martha, used to be a schoolteacher before stepping away due to health reasons. I was doing well with my business, better than I ever expected, so it felt only right to help them. My younger sister Chloe, who's 7 years younger and still trying to make it as a freelance designer, also leaned on me from time to time. Business loans, rent, design tools, whenever she asked, I sent. At first, I didn't think twice about it. That's just who I was. The reliable one. The successful daughter who never said no. Every time they needed something, I gave. Every time Chloe called in tears about a client who hadn't paid, or a landlord threatening eviction, I transferred money. I'd even postponed buying my dream house to continue supporting them. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That family comes first. But I didn't realize that while I was busy playing savior, they were playing me. Everything changed at a family barbecue on a hot Sunday afternoon in July. My parents hosted it in their backyard, the one I assumed they were renting, since they'd always claimed they couldn't afford a down payment. Chloe had come in from out of town, and we were all enjoying burgers and awkward small talk. I remember thinking, for once, we looked like a normal, happy family. Until my phone buzzed. It was from Chloe. A video. At first, I thought it might have been a group shot from the party. But when I opened it, I froze. It wasn't meant for me. In the video, Chloe was sitting in what looked like my parents' living room, laughing alongside Mom and Dad. They didn't know they were being recorded, or maybe they didn't care. Chloe was holding the phone selfie style, and they were all smiling like they'd just heard the best joke in the world. "She's our walking blank check," Chloe said, laughing. "I told you," Dad added, shaking his head. "Fake a hospital visit, and she sends cash before you can say copay. She cries if she thinks we're struggling," Mom chimed in. "Send her a sad voice note, and boom, $5,000. Every time." "Seriously," Chloe snorted. "She still thinks you're renting this place." My entire body went cold. I watched it twice, just to make sure I heard right. My parents, my own sister, joking about me like I was a clueless aim, calling me names, laughing at my kindness. I didn't say anything at the party. I couldn't. I was too stunned. But as I drove home that night, I saw everything clearly. The fake emergencies, the exaggerated sob stories, the guilt trips. None of it had been real. That night, I sat on my bed and made one of the clearest decisions of my life. I cut off the money. I didn't call to explain. I didn't reply to their usual end-of-the-month reminders. I just stopped. 3 days later, the storm hit. First came the texts. "Did the transfer bounce? Did you forget this month? Everything okay?" I ignored them. Then the calls, first Chloe, then Mom, then Dad. I let them all go to voicemail. I couldn't stomach the thought of hearing their voices pretending everything was fine. And then they showed up. It was early evening. I had just wrapped a call with one of my developers when I heard the doorbell. I checked the camera. It was them. All three. My stomach dropped. I should have turned off the lights and pretended I wasn't home. But some foolish part of me still needed to face them. I opened the door. "What the hell is going on?" My dad barked the second he saw me. "No warning, no message? You just stopped sending money," Mom added, her face twisted with rage. "You saw the video," Chloe muttered under her breath, her eyes darting away from mine. "I did," I said quietly, holding my ground. And I heard everything you said about me. So what? Dad snapped. We were joking. Joking. I repeated. You called me a blank check. You bragged about manipulating me. You're being dramatic, Mom spat. You think you're better than us now? Because you make more money. I didn't say anything. I just stared at them. And that silence? It drove them mad. Then it happened. In a sudden burst of anger, Mom raised her hand and slapped me across the face. Hard. You ungrateful little girl, she screamed. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't yell back. I just stood there. Because what they didn't know, what they never even thought to guess, was that the entire thing was being recorded. Every word, every threat, every slap. I had installed a discreet security camera in the corner of my living room months ago, after a break-in scare. It had captured everything in crystal clear HD. I closed the door behind them without another word. And as their angry voices faded down my driveway, I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and hit play. Their betrayal wasn't just personal anymore, it was evidence. And I wasn't just heartbroken. I was ready to make them regret underestimating me. After they left my house that night, I sat in silence for a long time. My cheek was still stinging from the slap, but that wasn't what hurt the most. It was the realization that my own family, people I had bent over backwards to support, saw me as nothing more than a money machine. A walking blank check. And worse, they were comfortable saying that out loud, laughing about it, thinking I'd never find out. But I had. And now I had evidence. I didn't react right away. I wasn't about to throw a tantrum or confront them emotionally. No. I'd done that in the past, and it had always ended with me apologizing me for caring too much. This time I was going to be smart. Cold even. Because now it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about justice. I called the only person I trusted to help me think straight, Aunt Lorraine. My dad's sister. She lived in Seattle and had been mostly out of the family picture for years. I'd always assumed she just liked her space. But that night, I found out the truth. When I told her everything, the video, the slap, the years of financial support, she wasn't surprised. Not even a little. They did the same thing to me 20 years ago, she said calmly. Not to the same degree, but the guilt, the manipulation, the fake helplessness, it's their pattern. You're kidding, I whispered, stunned. I wish I was. I cut them off back then. They turned the entire family against me, but I've never regretted it. We talked for nearly 2 hours. She reminded me that this wasn't my fault, that I hadn't failed them, they had failed me. And then she gave me the best advice I'd heard in years. Don't let them keep writing your story. Take the pen back. And that's exactly what I planned to do. The next morning, I called Megan, my attorney and close friend. I told her everything. She didn't even try to hide her outrage. Please tell me you still have that video, she said. I do. And the camera footage too from the slap. Good. That's emotional abuse and assault on top of everything else. Megan helped me map out the plan. First, we'd document everything, every bank transfer, every fake emergency text, every guilt trip voicemail. I had years of digital trails. Second, we'd verify the financial side. I pulled up statements showing more than $300,000 in total money sent over the last 5.5 years. Third, we'd preserve all digital evidence and back it up to cloud storage, just in case they tried to do something crazy, like sue me for cutting them off. You never know with people like that. While Megan worked on the legal angles, I began preparing the truth. I wasn't looking for sympathy or drama. I just wanted to expose the truth, especially to the people in my circle who had always seen my family as picture perfect. My team, my business partners, even some of my close friends, I had to show them what was really going on. I wanted control of my own narrative for once. So I sat down and wrote. I detailed the years of support, the sacrifices I'd made, and how I believed every sad story my parents and Chloe told me. I described the night I got the video, how they mocked me, and how the confrontation ended with my own mother striking me in my home. I embedded clips from the video and the security footage, not the full thing, just enough to show it was real. No editing, no dramatizing, just the truth. Then I posted it all to my blog. And I shared the link on my personal social media pages with a simple message. Sometimes, the people you love the most turn out to be the ones who never saw you as a person, just a resource. This is my story. Within hours, the post blew up. At first, it was just a few shares and some shocked comments from friends. Then strangers started reading it. It was being shared in groups, tweeted, blogged about. People wrote to me telling their own stories of being used, manipulated, and betrayed by their families. It was heartbreaking, but it was also empowering. I wasn't alone. And then the media caught on. A local Austin news outlet reached out for an interview. I declined, but they still ran the story using the public blog post. The headline read, "Successful entrepreneur cuts off family after discovering shocking betrayal." That's when everything really exploded. Within days, the rest of the world knew exactly who Douglas, Martha, and Chloe Monroe were. And more importantly, what they'd done. They, of course, were furious. They tried to contact me, but I'd already blocked their numbers and emails. They even created new accounts to message me, begging me to take everything down. "Think about the damage you're causing," one message said. "No," I whispered to myself. "You caused this. I'm just showing the receipts." Then came the threats. Legal action. Accusations. Claims that I had twisted the story, taken things out of context. That the video was a joke. That the slap was an accident. But none of it mattered, because I had the evidence. That's when Megan filed the official legal complaint. Fraud, financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and physical assault. We had enough to make a real case, and we did. The day they got served must have been a nightmare for them. But I didn't feel guilty. I felt peaceful. Calm. Like I had finally taken back something that had been stolen from me a long time ago. My voice. They thought I'd stay quiet. That I'd keep giving. That I'd forgive again, like always. But I wasn't the same Alyssa anymore. And I wasn't finished. Not even close. Filing the lawsuit was the beginning of the end, for them, at least. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. Megan walked me through every step of the process, making sure we had everything in order. She said we had a solid case, and from the reactions I'd seen online, people clearly believed the truth. But deep down, I wasn't doing this for sympathy or attention. I was doing this for myself, for the version of me that spent years putting everyone else's needs before my own and getting used in return. Once the paperwork was filed and processed, we received confirmation. They were officially under investigation. Charges were being considered for fraud, financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and assault. Just reading those words in black and white felt surreal. These were my parents, my sister, people who were supposed to protect me, not become the ones I needed protection from. Of course, they didn't take the news well. They showed up at my house again. This time it was just my parents, no Chloe. It was early evening, and I had just returned from a short walk when I saw their car parked in my driveway. My stomach turned. I almost turned around, but I reminded myself, I'm not afraid of them anymore. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. They looked tired, disheveled. The polished appearances I was so used to seeing, gone. My dad's face was red with anger, and my mom looked like she'd been crying for days. "We need to talk," my father growled. "No," I said, blocking the doorway. "You need to leave." "This is insane, Alyssa," my mother said, stepping forward. "How could you do this to your own family?" I didn't flinch. "How could you do what you did and think you'd get away with it?" "We were joking," my dad snapped. "You're ruining our lives over some harmless teasing." "Harmless," I repeated, my voice calm. "Mocking me behind my back, stealing from me, slapping me in my own home. Does that sound harmless to you?" My mom's lips tightened. "You're overreacting. You always have. Everything we did was out of necessity." I shook my head slowly. "You bought a condo, joined a country club, and took vacations while telling me you couldn't pay for medication. It wasn't like that. Enough." I cut her off. "I don't owe you an explanation. And unless you're here to admit what you did and take accountability, there's nothing more to say." They stood there in silence, shocked that I wasn't budging. Eventually they turned and left. But not before my father said one last thing. "You'll regret this, Alyssa. Family is everything. You've just thrown yours away." I closed the door without responding. In the days that followed, things escalated. Chloe finally reached out, not with an apology, but with a demand. She sent me a long email blaming me for tearing the family apart. She said she'd lost clients, her reputation was in ruins, and she couldn't believe I'd go this far. There was no acknowledgement of the video. No mention of the things she said. Just deflection, excuses, and finger-pointing. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on what came next. Megan helped me work with a forensic accountant to track where all my money had gone. The findings were shocking, even to me. Nearly every transfer I'd made over the past 5 years, more than $330,000, had gone into personal luxuries, designer clothes, high-end electronics, lavish getaways. My father had even made payments on a second car I didn't know they had. The truth wasn't just hurtful, it was infuriating. Meanwhile, the investigation moved quickly. Thanks to the overwhelming evidence, it wasn't long before the authorities stepped in. One morning, Megan called me and said, "They've been arrested." I froze. "What?" "They arrested your parents this morning." Chloe tooted. "Fraud, financial abuse, assault, everything we documented. They're being held for questioning." For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. Relief? Shock? Sadness? It was all jumbled together. I sat down on my couch, staring at nothing, as the weight of everything finally started to lift. They were actually being held accountable. The news spread quickly. The same media outlets that picked up my original blog post were now reporting the arrests. Headlines like "Family Arrested After Daughter Exposes Long-Term Fraud" started popping up online. I didn't comment publicly anymore. I didn't need to. The truth was out, and it was doing its job. In the following weeks, things changed. They lost the condo. It went into foreclosure after missed mortgage payments. Their bank accounts were frozen. Chloe's design business shut down completely after sponsors and clients pulled away. According to a friend of a friend, my parents were now living in a small rental property outside of town, something well below their usual standards. For the first time, they were living within their means. But I wasn't celebrating their downfall. That wasn't what this was about for me. I wasn't out for revenge just to see them suffer. I wanted the cycle to stop. I wanted to take control of my life again, to stop being the person everyone leaned on while secretly laughing behind my back. That's why I started something new. I used my experience, my platform, and my pain to create a nonprofit for people like me, adults who had been financially manipulated or emotionally abused by their families. It started small, a support group, some online resources, a hotline. But it grew fast. People needed it. People needed to feel seen and heard, just like I had. A few months after the arrests, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was from my mother. It was 4 pages long, filled with half apologies and emotional pleas. She said they were sorry, but also said they didn't know how else to survive. She talked about being embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed of how far things had gone. At the end, she asked for forgiveness. I stared at the pages, trying to feel something. Anything. Anger. Sadness. Pity. But I didn't feel any of it. Just clarity. They were finally facing consequences. And I was finally free. But I also knew, deep down, that this story wasn't quite over yet. The letter from my mother stayed on my desk for days. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, but I also couldn't bring myself to respond. It wasn't just the words, it was everything that had led to those words. All the lies, the fake emergencies, the manipulation, the slap, the mockery. And even now, after everything had come crashing down, the letter still tried to shift the blame. We didn't know how else to survive. As if that justified what they did. As if taking advantage of me was their only option. I knew better now. Their court case went to trial 6 weeks after their arrest. It was surreal walking into that courtroom and seeing them sitting on the other side, my own family wearing formal clothes like they were trying to appear respectable. My father barely looked at me. My mother glanced over once, But when our eyes met, she quickly looked away. Chloe stared straight ahead the entire time, expression stiff, like she was just waiting for it to be over. The prosecutors did their job well. They laid everything out: the money trail, the false claims, the recorded conversations, the security footage. It wasn't just a family squabble, it was documented financial abuse. And when the footage of the slap played on the courtroom screen, I heard a gasp from someone in the gallery. It echoed the one I'd let out when I first watched it myself. The room fell completely silent after that. My statement came near the end. I was nervous at first. My hands were shaking, but the second I started speaking, everything poured out of me. I talked about how much I'd loved my family, how I believed every word they said for years, how I'd put my own dreams on hold to help them, and how I found out the truth, not through a confrontation or a confession, but through a video that was never meant for me. I was their daughter, I said. Not a bank. Not a blank check. And when I finally stopped giving, they showed me exactly who they were. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The truth was enough. The jury took less than 2 hours to deliberate. All three, my mother, my father, and Chloe, were found guilty.
Fraud.
Financial exploitation. Assault. They didn't get long prison sentences, 2 years each, plus restitution, but it was enough. Enough to validate everything I had been through. Enough to make it clear that what they did was wrong. That I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't overreacting. After the verdict, I stepped outside the courthouse and took the deepest breath I'd taken in years. The weight I had carried for so long, it didn't disappear completely, but it got lighter. Manageable. Like I could finally move forward. The next few months were quiet. Peaceful even. For the first time, I didn't have to brace myself every time my phone rang. I didn't wake up to guilt-tripping texts or calls asking for money. I focused on my business, my nonprofit, and my own healing. I spent time with people who loved me without expecting anything in return. I learned to trust again, slowly, carefully. My nonprofit began to grow. More people started coming forward with their stories. People who had been used by family, manipulated into silence, made to feel guilty for setting boundaries. Some of their stories were even worse than mine: decades of abuse, hundreds of thousands stolen, entire lives dictated by guilt. But there was something powerful in the connection, in knowing you're not alone. We launched a campaign called More Than Blood, sharing real stories anonymously to shed light on financial abuse within families. The response was overwhelming. Survivors reached out, therapists offered to volunteer, even lawyers like Megan joined to provide free consultations. We weren't just talking about the problem anymore, we were helping people find their way out of it. A year passed. I didn't hear from my parents or Chloe again after the trial. I knew they were serving time, but I didn't follow the details. I didn't need to. I had my closure. Not the kind where everything is tied up with a pretty bow, but the kind where you finally stop bleeding. And then one morning I got a message. It was from a former family friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She told me that my parents were being released early for good behavior, and that Chloe had already been out for a few weeks. I stared at the message for a long time. A few days later, I came home to find a familiar car parked near the curb. My stomach flipped. I didn't want drama. I didn't want a scene. But I was ready, stronger, smarter, and no longer afraid. I walked up the driveway and saw them, my parents, standing on my porch, looking older, thinner, more worn than I'd ever seen them. Chloe wasn't there. They didn't say anything right away. Just watched me approach, waiting for some kind of sign. When I got close enough, my mother finally spoke. "We just want to talk," she said softly. I didn't answer. "We've lost everything," my father added. "The house, the car, our friends. We've paid the price." "You didn't pay," I said calmly. "You served time. There's a difference." "We're sorry, Alyssa," my mother said. "Truly. We've had time to think. We were wrong." "Not just wrong," I replied. "Cruel, calculated, and selfish." My father sighed. "We're not asking for money. We're asking for a chance to fix things." "I spent years giving you chances," I said. "And every time, you took more than I offered. This time, I'm choosing myself. We're your parents, my mother whispered, eyes glossy. Family. I shook my head. Family doesn't destroy you and call it love. Family doesn't see your kindness as weakness. I walked past them and opened my door. You can go now, I said quietly. There's nothing left here for you. They didn't follow. After a moment, I heard their footsteps retreat down the path. The car door closed. The engine started. And then they were gone. I stood in the doorway for a moment, the wind brushing against my skin, and smiled to myself. Because in the end, I got my justice. Not just in the courtroom, but in my heart. I took back control of my life. I exposed the truth. I stopped the cycle. And for the first time in my adult life, I was truly free. Not because they were gone, but because I had finally chosen me.